Hey guys, real quick before we start the video, I want to direct you to the community tab on my channel. I am currently running an event for you, the viewers, to rate every single Monster Hunter monster from 1 to 5 stars. This project is going to be a bit of a run back from the 20th anniversary popularity poll and is meant to allow everyone to voice their opinion on every monster, so we can get a big picture look at how the whole community feels about the entire Monster Hunter bestiary. There will be a new poll on the community tab every single day at noon Eastern Standard Time, and all polls will remain live on the channel, so you can answer any of them at any time. You will not miss out if you miss the poll for the day. I will be updating numbers all the way from now until the end of October when the last polls have been run, and in October or November, we're going to have a massive video event where your comments will be read, all the numbers will be crunched, and the monsters will be reordered based on how you all voted. Every vote on every poll matters, and anyone has a chance to have their comment read in the video itself. And if you want to help me get more data and reach the broader Monster Hunter community, I'd appreciate a like on this video and, maybe hit the subscribe button to help this channel grow. It'll put me and this project in front of more eyes. Okay, no more YouTuber CTA shilling. Here's the video you actually clicked on. Thank you. They say you never forget your first. And because I'm specifically referring to a weapon in a long-running, still ongoing video game series, I don't have to leave my first behind or forget her. And because said love is a 6-foot-long battle axe forged out of bone, steel, and the remains of hyper-dangerous animals capable of complex transformations into a two-handed sword that is loaded up with elemental power discharging files that feed off combat itself, striking power forceful enough to send full-grown armor-clad human beings flying over 10 feet in the air, and elemental discharges with enough concussive force to shatter wyvern bone, I don't plan to forget about this lovely implement of war anytime soon. I, my friends, am a certified try-baby. And when I got off that boat for the first time, I tried all sorts of weapons. The hammer, the greatsword, the sword and shield, but eventually my hands got a hold of that long-reaching, heavy-hitting, mighty morphin tree chopper, and I knew I had found what I was looking for. And as the stories and tales of young Connor tend to go, man, did I not know what I was doing with that thing, but I sure as hell was slaying monsters with it. Are you also one of those gamers who hoards every item you ever collected up until the final battle of the game because you never know when you might need that item, and then you don't even use it for the final battle because you're still not sure if you're gonna need them later for like the secret final battle? Hi, that was me. I didn't know when the best time to use the sword was, so I almost exclusively fought using the axe because I was nervous that I was gonna waste the sword mode when I didn't need it. The sword that automatically regenerates its own power over time. Oh, and try was around before monster mounting was a thing, so that axe uppercut move that sent teammates flying, that attack was generally considered pretty extremely unhelpful. Frustratingly extremely unhelpful. Young Connor got kicked out of lobbies for using it extremely unhelpful. And I never changed my ways. In fact, Monster Hunter in the long term more or less just vindicated my bad habits and people tossing. See, I wasn't wrong, I was just ahead of the curve. I really do love this thing. It's pretty nimble, and it can hit nice and hard. It's got some intricacy to it, but its combo pathing has become so fluid that you can make effective attack patterns kind of just look like brain-dead button mashing. You can run it as a nice meaty raw damage weapon, you can turn it into a more prominent elemental powerhouse. In my personal opinion, I find the Switch Axe to be one of the most new player-friendly weapons out there. Considering its attacks combo from one to another so easily that you don't really have to worry all that much about specific inputs. And the file meter pretty much just charges and uses itself, so the resource management isn't too demanding on your end. Like all Monster Hunter weapons, the skill ceiling is very high, but I find the barrier to entry quite forgiving, and I'd recommend this exquisite hunting tool to pretty much anyone that's just starting out. And, real quick before we get started, I am by no means a meta player or a speedrunner. This isn't necessarily a guide to the Switch Axe. Other people can do that much better than I can. I'm just here to talk about the damn thing because I love it. The Switch Axe was also a pretty major paradigm shift for Monster Hunter weapons. Shifting states and resource management and more outlandish concepts have been the norm for Monster Hunter weapons introduced in the wake of Tri. Yeah, some of the second-gen weapons are pretty goofy and somewhat impractical, but, I think a massive firearm with a knife taped to it and the invigorating power of music attached to a blunt object are at least marginally less over the top than a shape-shifting war axe that generates lightning explosions by feasting on the blood of its foes. Ever since 2009, new additions to the Monster Hunter arsenal have been kinda wild. They include a different type of sword that turns into a different type of axe that makes a different kind of elemental explosion, but this one needs a bachelor's to operate instead of a GED. There's a bug friend you can throw at monsters which makes you better at flying through the air on a stick. There's now dual handheld hydraulic presses that can fly. There is the physical manifestation of a planet's magnetic poles attached to several blades that can also shapeshift into a blunt object. And there is both the Switch Axe's out of its mind younger brother and the Switch Axe's lesser known youngest brother, who really likes Sonic the Hedgehog. It makes me curious where they'd go if they make another weapon for Monster Hunter. Are they gonna just kind of keep pushing the nuttiness they can come up with, or would they want to reel things back and look at something a bit more grounded? It's hard to say, but I do think that the mechanic creep definitely kind of starts with Switch Axe, and it's been interesting to see how much the original 11 have changed over the years so that they could catch up with the intricacies of the newer weapons. Oh, and by the way, cycling back a bit, I'm not going to talk about the Switch Axe F from Frontier really all that much because I just don't know it yet. I only just started playing Frontier. I'm live streaming it. You can check those out live, usually on Wednesdays. Neat little plug. Okie doke, so let's talk specifics. What's this industrial grade Transformers toy actually capable of? Well, fundamentally, the Switch X has always had kind of the same core game plan, but it has improved its ability to execute that game plan with additional mechanics and fluidity. The axe form has kind of a middling level of heft and weight to its attacks. It has some large, hard-hitting slashes and chops, including a wild swing pseudo-infinite combo where you can just kind of keep your axe swinging back and forth in a repetitive pattern until you run out of stamina. Despite its size, the axe form is fairly maneuverable. It has a quick evasive sidestep, and most of its attacks don't have the most end lag on them, so there's not much preventing a quick roll for escaping after a major hit. It is in the axe state where you can perform the teammate hurling upswing. It's a great move for whacking monster tails, but for the first 4 years of the Switch Axe's lifespan, it was a miserable move in multiplayer. Then, jumping attacks got added in 4, and it turned into the coolest wombo combo move you could run with your fellow hunters pretty much just overnight. While you're hacking away in your axe form, a little yellow bar will slowly start to fill up. That's the energy you got saved up from your sword. Swap that bad boy over, and now your playstyle shifts to quick and aggressive multi-hit combos backed with the additional power of the axe's specific file type. You got power files for extra raw damage, exhaust for stun and stamina draining, and elemental or status that bolsters the weapon's output of whatever element or status the weapon comes with. You can unleash a flurry of attacks that will slowly drain your sword meter, or expend large chunks of your sword reserve by detonating massive elemental discharges. If you drain your sword completely, you'll be forced to go back into axe mode. However, if your sword is beneath a certain level of charge, you can swap back into axe mode and manually reload the files in your sword. Welcome to Monster Hunter, where we sharpen our hammers and reload our axes. More or less, you want to be using the axe form for distance and reach, while you build up the sword mode to unleash a barrage of elementally backed slashes, slices, and explosions. Then reset back to axe mode and repeat. So that game plan has remained consistent throughout. But man, the Switch Axe has gotten monstrously efficient at pulling that loop off recently. So efficient that it's not even really a loop anymore. It's a complex, hectic, and quite invigorating hurricane of bone-shattering impacts, bloodletting blade barrages, and consistent transformations. It was Monster Hunter World that truly turned the Switch Axe into the froth-mouthed berserker that it is today. Simply put, just about every attack that the 5th generation Switch Axe has can now be followed up with a transformation. You can perform your wild swing, end it with a big finishing chop, follow that directly up into a morph, go straight into a blitz of sword attacks, transform back out into the axe, chop at a monster's tail that's up in the air, switch back into the sword form, and fire off an elemental discharge, and you can pull pull that off pretty seamlessly. It is outrageously fun to hop back and forth, constantly swapping up combat styles. Is it mathematically optimal? Don't give a couldn't tell ya. I'm having way too much fun, and I prefer it this way. Yeah, the loop still exists, but it more or less takes care of itself for ya. And that constant swapping means you'll have a bit of time in your combos where the axe is replenishing your sword. The one drawback of World Switch Axe was they added a new mechanic to the sword that kind of made the axe itself a bit more of just a means to an end than it already was on occasion. In Worlds, if you landed enough hits with the sword form, you could overcharge its files, resulting in every singular hit dealing an additional tick of damage that was based on the file type. You could more or less turn every sword hit into a whole hit and a half. Now, Iceborne did make a decent attempt to balance things out a little bit by adding a finishing chop to the Wild Swing combo. That would then empower the axe. This move bolstered the axe's ability to do damage and to flinch monsters. It was a change that did level the playing field a little bit between the two weapons, but it wasn't really enough to put the weapon modes on quite the same footing, and the separate buffs now meant that the two forms were kind of competing for your attention rather than working together. In Rise, though, they rectified this issue and pushed the transformation ability of the Switch Axe even further. You can do morphing attacks while you're just moving now, instead of needing to be in mid-combo to trigger them. They added a whole new skill to improve the speed and damage of morphing attacks. The Switch skills have added bigger, stronger, cooler-looking morphing combos. And to top all that off, they added the overcharged files damage mechanic to the axe mode now, having that extra damage tick be on both forms of the weapon. You know, I'd still be willing to bet that the extra damage is still more viable in sword mode because of its attack speed and the relationship between that and elemental damage, but I feel like Monster Hunter Rise really wants you to weave the transformation into the combat itself. It wants you to morph in and out and back and forth in a non-stop stream of attacks. Monster Hunter Rise, to me, is the first time where the transformation of the Switch Axe feels like a part of the main battle plan and not just a gimmick to kind of get the sword stronger. This is absolutely my favorite incarnation of the weapon for that reason. And to then backtrack in time a little bit, holy this thing is fun in Generations Ultimate too. Coolest thing about the Switch Axe in this game is that even with 6 whole hunting styles, you really kinda just can't go wrong with any of the ones you pick. A lot of the time in Generations Ultimate, you're gonna bump into at least one hunting style for your weapon that it doesn't really bring anything interesting to the table for that weapon, or it kinda just guts the moveset a little bit too deeply in order to compensate for the style's gimmick, and you're kinda just feeling with like a weak weapon that does one neat thing. But here, dude, all 6 styles are pretty fun. So, aerial style, pretty simple, right? Your rolls kick off monsters, they do jumping attacks, making for easy mounting. You swap yourself into sword mode on your Switch Axe, and you get to slash the monster for free when you're going up in that jump. And then when you're coming back down and landing, you get to do your regular sword hit. So you get to just machine gun off these jumping attacks for free in this mode. All right, so how about Valor style? This is the best choice for a lot of weapons because the Valor sheathing is just so damn good. And it's still really good with the Switch Axe. It's just not as obviously the best choice for this weapon specifically. Valor style will lock you out of your normal weapon morphing for a little bit. And while you're waiting for your Valor meter to build up, the only way for you to swap properly is to cancel the Valor sheath into a morphing attack. But once that gauge fills, not only do you have full access to your weapon's proper arsenal, but now you have that speedy, quick little Valor dodge, and it is an excellent addition to the Switch Axe's already fairly commendable maneuverability. Yet all that hack and slash action back with even faster and more aggressive movement now. Valor style just makes the Switch Axe better what it was already really good at doing. Striker style is pretty cool, because Switch Axe has a number of hunter arts that synergize pretty well with one another. But if you want to run better Striker, you run Alchemy Switch Axe. Now, I have barely ever messed around with or touched Alchemy style before. Damn, dude, this is kind of fun. Alchemy is a weird style, right? Because it's built to be kind of support oriented because of the items you can generate for free. And then on top of that, it gives you 3 hunter arts. So to compensate for all of that, normally Alchemy style really kind of guts your weapon's moveset pretty bad. Yeah, that's not really the case here. With the Switch Axe, your moveset is simplified, but it's not really dismantled. They honestly just kind of made the weapon more unga bunga than it already was. So instead of pressing a designated morph button and giving you 2 whole separate movesets, Alchemy Switch Axe puts your axe attacks on X and your sword attacks on A. So, if you're doing an attack that can follow up into a transformation, just tapping the other button will flip your weapon over, creating a free-flowing attack pattern that feels kind of like a simplified precursor to Rise's incarnation of the weapon. It kind of feels like the Monster Hunter version of simple controls from Street Fighter. So you take that, and you add a whole magical barrel of support items, including a whetstone that speeds up the recovery of the 3 Hunter arts that you can equip. And now you got yourself Alchemy Switch Axe. And you can bring some pretty damn cool Hunter arts with ya for the Switch Axe, some of which combo off of each other pretty damn well. The big one you're going to be taking a lot is Demon Riot. With this one, you can jack up the damage of your sword, creating an effect where the sword gauge dissipates gradually, but your damage off of the sword mode is going to skyrocket. And if you want to counteract that dwindling sword gauge, you bring Quick Reload to reset the sword meter pretty much all the way back up to full while your Demon Riot is still up and running. And if you're feeling fancy, you can then bring the multi-step combo Trance Slash, in which every sword strike within that combo will be bolstered by Demon Riots. And if you want another flashy option on there, you can slot in the Tempest Axe, which bolsters the attack speed of the Wild Swing combo considerably. This one's kind of a tough one to land consistently, and it lacks the synergy that the other ones have, but it feels super sick to pull off this combo and get the axe going really fast. And just in general, dude, Generations Ultimate was really nice to this weapon. And looking at some special attacks from 5th generation, World introduced a pretty cool, if underutilized, disengage gimmick where you can cancel out of a Wild Swing combo with a Slinger Burst that sends you back several feet. Great tool for creating distance before a monster gets up off the ground or recovers from paralysis. Even further adding to the ability of Switch Axe to cleanly disengage is a Fade Slash that generates less distance than the Slinger Burst but also has less recovery time. And it is here that we find probably the most iconic attack in the Switch Axe's entire arsenal, the Zero-Sum Discharge. It is a modified version of the elemental discharge that we all know and love. This time, if you manage to snag the discharge onto a specific body part of the monster, something special happens. And let me tell you, there are few things in this world more masculine than grabbing a dragon by the horns, shoving a sword the size of a kayak in its cerebral cortex, and purging said sword of so much elemental power that it detonates in the head of the monster and rips you off of its body. If this wasn't a video game with pre-programmed health bars and all that, ain't nothing out there surviving this absolute barbarism of an attack. Iceborne expanded the utility of this move a little bit, where if you are doing a normal elemental discharge and you want to swap it over to Zero Sum, you can cancel the first attack with a Clutch Claw that will pull you onto the monster so you can cleanly go for the Zero Sum. And now you move on to the game that is built around new special attacks. Monster Hunter Rise, of course, brings a slew of new moves and special abilities to the Switch Axe in the form of Switch skills, on top of all the morphing craziness that this game already was adding to the Switch Axe. Now, to my surprise, there's honestly not a lot of ported over Hunter arts from Monster Hunter Generations here. In this game, it was pretty common for Rise weapons to reuse a few Hunter arts, but not here. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go into every single one of these in great detail, but there's some sick stuff you can do here. Wire Step and Switch Charger are both effective evasive tools, Wire Step being a 90-degree leap around the center of a circle, and Switch Charger being a straightforward dash that refills some of your sword gauge. The Compressed Elemental Discharge is a pretty sick-looking spinning burst that replaces the Zero-Sum Discharge and traditional Elemental Discharge. Its animation is fast, but it has a lot of ending lag on it, which kind of compromises what I think was supposed to be the main gimmick of this attack, of it being a much quicker discharge burst. For this reason, I honestly rarely use the move. The two-staged Morph Slash combo is a prolonged morph attack that can benefit from the Rapid Morph skill and can refill some of your sword gauge. It is comboed out of the Wild Swing. Soaring Wyvern is an attack that propels you up into the air and has you dive back down sword first, leaving a trace amount of file energy that detonates on a delay. Coolest part of this move is that you can combo it off of the end of the zero-sum discharge when you're being blown back into the air. And then you have the elemental burst counter. Now, Rise and Sunbreak catch some deserved flack for their habit of slapping a counterattack on damn near every single weapon in the game. And for the record, I do not think the Switch Axe needs a counterattack. However, in defense of the elemental burst counter, I do think it is a far better executed example of these counterattack silk binds than many of its contemporaries. That is mainly because of the risk factor. Activating the burst counter doesn't automatically trigger the counterattack, like most of these silk binds do. It instead puts you in a ready stance that slowly drains your sword meter. Run out of that meter and the counter is cancelled. When a monster attacks, you have to time a separate button press at the right moment to properly activate the counter. Most similar moves merely require you to activate the attack before you get hit, and the monster attack will automatically trigger the counter attack. With the elemental burst counter, you have to time the activation soon enough that you don't lose your sword meter and then trigger the counter itself before you get hit. It is a much more difficult attack to execute, so the risk of just tossing the move out there is far greater than most other counterattacks. And the reward for successful execution is heavy damage and a fully overcharged sword. Even though I don't think this level of execution quite fits the caveman hack and slash nature of the Switch Axe, I do like the intricacies of the elemental burst counter in isolation when compared to a lot of similar moves. It feels like way less of a safe and easy panic option to just hurl out an attack, and it can be very dangerous to you if it is used incorrectly. And that, my friends, is a look at the first Monster Hunter weapon that I truly fell in love with. 14 years later, and all that's really changed is that I found other weapons that I also love. I admire that the Switch Axe can do so much without feeling like an overstuffed weapon that lost its identity. If anything, the changes and enhancement this weapon has received have further solidified its place as Monster Hunter's quick-swapping slasher. It's not Monster Hunter's heaviest raw damage powerhouse, it's not its most nimble weapon, and it's not the greatest dispenser of elemental power, but it is highly competent in all three categories, and you can build this thing in a number of ways because of that. It's gotten a massive gap between its skill floor and ceiling, and allowing new players to have fun from moment one, whilst offering a ton of layers to more experienced players. I have just no complaints. I think the weapon is in a great spot right now, and I want to see where this bad boy goes from here. And one more thing, before we wrap this up completely. Shout out to anyone on Monster Hunter's art team who has worked on Switch Axes. I gotta imagine it's not an easy feat to create a weapon that simultaneously looks great as an axe, looks great as an axe with extra components and bits on it for transformation, and then transforms into a great looking sword. And dude, Switch Axe designs are consistently pretty damn fantastic. I want the Sinister Saints back. This has been CR-Volcanic or Connor. I'll see you around. Shout out to all the patrons, and special shout out to Nihilist Chimerax, Datboy Doinda Ding, Sir Newt Newt, Peaberry, Stefan Kalnin, Shaggy Grizzly, Pico Plush, and Daniel Delasarte. Thank you very much.